Hi, I'm Roberta Moore, and I'm a filmmaker, and some of you are familiar with the film Near-Death Experience, What Medical Professionals Need to Know. How many of you have seen that? We showed it 3 times here at the conference, yeah. We are having a new project that Diane Corcoran is really the driving force behind this project. And it's about near-death experience, what veterans need to know, and so we're very happy to have you here today. Did everybody get a brochure? Everybody get one of these? Yeah, okay. So we're set on that. Diane and I have been talking about this project for years. When we started the other video in 2012, she said, I really would like to do something for veterans. So we did the general one first, and now we are on to making one specifically for veterans, because veterans have issues that are different from the general population. I'm getting an education. I was not in the military. I didn't come from a military family. But what I'm finding out is that it's very difficult for veterans to disclose their NDEs, even more so, I think, than the general population. What I'm told is because of the culture, the military culture, and also because the way near-death experience is misunderstood and confused with PTSD and with mental illness, that if people decide it's better to stay quiet than to try to tell anybody about these transcendent experiences. We are in the process of doing interviews. We've been interviewing before the conference and during the conference. If you feel like you have something that you want to share, please let me know. We still have tomorrow. We've been doing interviews today. We'll be doing interviews tomorrow. And by next year at the conference, we will have our video for all of you to see. So now we're in the preliminary pre-production stage of gathering video, and we are doing fundraising, and Diane will talk more about that, because we do need funds in order to help us create this video. It will be a training film that is geared to inform veterans. There are veterans out there who have had experiences and they don't know what it was. And they may think that something crazy happened to them, and they may be questioning all their lives, was I crazy? I've heard people say that over and over again. So it's for veterans, it's for their families, it's also for their counselors. One last thing, I'm going to be interviewing a researcher up in Philadelphia, Dr. David Hufford, and he has recently done a study about near-death experience and veterans, and he found that over 1/3 of veterans that he surveyed had had near-death experience or something similar. Okay, so you've got this big, my jaw dropped. The specific number was 38%. And I just went, 38%? Wow. And I talked to a vet, and he said, well, we do dangerous jobs. He also found, he surveyed counselors who work with vets, and what he found was they knew a lot about PTSD. They knew almost nothing about near-death experience or any spiritual event. Then he asked them a further question: would you like further training? Would you like training about these spiritual events? And it was close to 100%.
That's it.
Of the counselors working with veterans who said they would like training to understand these events, because they know they're happening, but they don't have any training. And so that's what this video is to do. It's to help the veterans, the families, and the counselors who need information. Okay, thank you.
There's a hidden problem for veterans that their care providers have never been trained to recognize. Thousands of our veterans have had near-death experiences or NDEs, and they don't even know what's happened to them. Our vets need help. In partnership with the International Association for Near-Death Studies, we are making a video to educate our veterans and their care providers about near-death experiences and their after effects.
I was jerked out of my body, and it was so fast it was a blink of an eye, it was over. And I'm floating in a cloud-like area with clouds around me, and I'm trying to figure out what happened, and I look down and I've got a silverish gray body that's semi-transparent, and I'm going, wow, look at this, I've got a glass body.
There's no doubt that I died, okay? But in my life review, I dropped into the bottom of the most darkness you can possibly imagine.
I had one of those experiences where I saw my whole life flash in front of me. I saw everybody that I loved. It was like I was in a room and everybody, it was my mom and dad, my brother.
These veterans' near-death experiences may have left them asking questions like, am I crazy? Or has this ever happened to anybody else? Or why won't anyone listen to me? Unfortunately, these vets could be ignored, misdiagnosed, or over-medicated. NDEs happen when service members are seriously wounded or when they have had a close brush with death. They may feel their consciousness separate from the body, and they may experience transcendent realms. These life-altering experiences may be repressed, but the vivid memories never really go away.
I think it's critical that we have a teaching video for veterans and veterans caregivers. Thousands of veterans are coming home with mental issues from PTSD. They're coming home with traumatic brain injuries. They're coming home with lots of other physical trauma. And in addition, they're having near-death experience. And they're absolutely afraid to talk about it.
In our proposed video, veterans who have had NDEs are ready to share their experiences in order to save other vets from the psychological pain that they have carried for too long. They deserve greater peace in their lives. Help our vets. Help us make this video. Donate today.
As you watch the video and hear the appeal to help find veterans, how many of you have a VFW or a Disabled American Veterans chapter in your town?
I think so.
Take a good video, find that chapter, and ask if you can share it. It's a great opportunity to find new people that need to tell their story.
Great idea. And any help you can give us in making donations specifically for the video, if you send it to IANDS and just say veteran video, then it will go directly to that, because we really want to put this out next year. And if you have any individual friends who are veterans that have had NDEs, please have them call the office. Many times they will get them to me because they don't want to talk to anybody that doesn't really understand the service or isn't a veteran themselves. So I am willing to speak with all of them. And so we're going to want to go right along. Woody's going to tell his story. Yes, go ahead.
How much money are you looking for?
We have to raise about $15,000. So if anyone would like to write a check for that while they're here, we would be eternally grateful. And of course, if we could get more than that, then we could pay for a great deal of distribution, for marketing, get it out to veterans, all the hospitals. I mean, you know, ideally, if we had $50,000 or $100,000, we could blanket the video out there and really do a much better job. Yes. We have actually had Roberta put up
Generosity.com.
Generosity.com.
And we need more response.
Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Woody. He's going to tell his story, and then we'll get back to you and hear some other stories. Thank you.
Thank you very much. First, let me say how grateful I am to be here and have the opportunity to share my story. I did not talk about my story for almost 20 years, and I'll just kind of start from the beginning. A little about me. I served 22 years in the United States Navy. All of it in the P-3 Orion aircraft, so I never spent a single day on a ship because the plane's too big for an aircraft carrier. Yes, that's where I had my aircraft incident, actually. So because I never served on the ship, I like to say that was a perfect Navy career. But by the time the incident happened, I'd already had over about 7-8 years of flying experience, had over 3,500 hours of flight time, and I was already an instructor flight engineer. And I was a qualified flight engineer at 21 years old on a 70-ton 4-engine heavyweight airplane. So I was stationed in Hawaii, Naval Air Station Barbers Point, and we were doing, it's 1982, we were doing the RIM PAC exercise. That's Rim of the Pacific. It's the largest military exercise in the world. And it was my crew's turn to go do a 12-hour mission. So we had full load of fuel, max allowable takeoff weight, full crew, everything. And we take off, we climb out to about 10,000 feet. We're going to go higher for our transition to where we're going to do our mission. But at 10,000 feet, we had an engine malfunction on number 1 engine. We had to shut it down. So now we have to declare an emergency. We have to dump fuel to reduce our weight. But we couldn't dump, you can only dump a certain amount. So we flew around for another 45 minutes to get down to max allowable land weight. So you don't damage the airplane structure or structural integrity if you land too heavy. Well, when you declare an emergency, they bring the fire trucks out to the runway and they park them literally on the side of the runway. You have 2 at one spot and 2 on each side of the runway, 2 more down there and 2 more down there. And as you land and go by them, they literally pull out and chase you down the runway, and then the next pair pulls in behind them as you go down in case something goes wrong, so they can be right there for you. That normally is okay, but this time it wasn't. And what happened was as the pilot came in and landed, we landed on 040 left, runway 4 left. It's parallel runways. And there's a large asphalt between the 2 runways, a section of ground between the 2 runways that's covered with asphalt. But there's a lot of debris out there because planes don't land there. You're not even supposed to taxi there or any of that. So it's collected debris over the years. And I say that for a reason. So when we touch down on the landing, we're coming in way faster than normal. Typically we'd land with 8,000 pounds of fuel at the end of a flight. We still had 42,000 pounds of fuel on board. And so we're really heavy, coming in faster than normal because you need the extra airspeed to stay in the air. And when we landed, the main mounts came down, everything seemed okay, nose gear came down, and we immediately departed the runway to the right. And it happened fast. And the fire trucks were sitting there, and we're going directly at the fire truck. And I had death coming at me at over 150 miles an hour, and there was absolutely nothing I could do about it. And as we got closer, it was all slow motion, but it was happening real fast at the same time. And I just couldn't stop thinking, I'm dead. I knew it. I said, I'm dead, and I'm never going to see my son again. I had a 2.5-year-old son at home. And I knew I was never going to see him again. And as we're coming at the fire truck, literally we're so close to the fire truck, the right wingtip went over the top of the front left corner of the fire truck. The guy on the water cannon in the silver firefighter suit on top, I can see his face screaming at the top of his lungs. Can't hear him, but I can see him screaming in terror. And as the plane went by the aircraft, there's the propeller spinning. I believe the propeller was so close that it gapped the front edge of the fire truck, and the timing was such that it went between the blades as we went by. And it was a microsecond of difference of location or speed. I would not be here talking to you today. And when that started to happen, my fear was so great, the terror, that my soul leaped out of my body, and I'm outside the airplane all of a sudden. But I'm also still in the airplane. Now I have these 2 different perspectives going on at the same time. And I don't understand that. I'm really confused. And while I'm in the airplane, he started going into reverse thrust as the co-pilot yelled at him to get on the brakes, and he started slamming into reverse thrust, and it threw all this dust and debris up in the air, and this Pepsi can came from left to right across the windshield. Probably took a split second to blow by, but at the same time it's slow motion, and it's tumbling. I can read it. Pepsi, fluid came out. It atomized as it hit the air that's blasting it. And then when that happened, I started focusing on the atomization, and I'm seeing all the debris in the air. And then all of a sudden, I literally became the debris. I was at every location, millions of them in the air, all this dust, the tiniest piece, it didn't matter what it was. If it's in the air, I was there. From every one of these locations, so they're wrapping around each other. And I had a 360-degree bubble vision view of all, from every direction. I knew where everything was, and as chaotic as that sounds, it was confusing, but at the same time, there was this sublime perfection that I knew everything was right where it was supposed to be, when it was supposed to be there, doing exactly what it was supposed to be doing. And except for in the seat, when I was, my perspective in the engineer seat was normal. I did not have a bubble vision view in the chair, and I didn't understand that either. And we're screaming all the way across the runway still, and we're headed at the other runway. By the time we stopped, the right main mount and the nose gear, there's a slight slope on the edge of the runway so that rain can drain off if it gets rain. So we're half on, half off the runway, and we stopped, and the plane's at a tilt. And when we finally got stopped, that outside perspective all went, whew. I didn't make any noise, but I just kind of do that and just pull back in. And all of a sudden, I'm sitting in the chair going, what the hell was that? I'm looking at Dan Duffy, Lieutenant Duffy, in the right seat, and I wanted to say something to him, but I'm totally confused, and I don't know what to say. And he's looking at me, and I'm looking at him, and our eyes are locked. And then I hear this whoo, whoo sound, right? And then Duffy's eyes shifted over my shoulder, and Lieutenant Lundgren, the pilot, the guy that gooned the landing, I turn and look at him. He's still on an adrenaline rush, and he's white-knuckling the yoke, and he's trying to get something out, and he can't say it. And you can see the stress in his face. He's whoo, whoo, and he finally says, "What the did I do wrong?" And then shortly after that, all the fire trucks caught up to us, and we realized nothing was wrong with the plane after a while, and we literally added power and pushed up to get on the other runway and finished the landing. So I made a 3-engine emergency landing in a 4-engine heavyweight airplane, and I used 2 entirely different runways to make one landing with. And I don't ever want to do that again. So I didn't say anything to Duffy or anybody else. I was like, they'll think I'm crazy. I just knew that, so I didn't say anything. The next day, the commanding officer took myself and Lieutenant Lundgren, the guy that made the mistake on the landing, out to fly again, and I just didn't even consider it to be an issue. So we took off, went flying, started coming in on the first approach, and the post-traumatic stress came up in me. That phrase wasn't even a term yet. Post-traumatic stress back in 1982 didn't exist. And so I didn't want the skipper to know that I was struggling and my head wasn't in the game, so I bent over and grabbed the power levers to act like I was ready to do a wave off, and I had my head in the game, but I didn't. And I didn't want him to know that. He's right here. I knew if he saw that I'd never fly again. And I had to get through several. I couldn't look outside on those first few approaches, and I finally had to talk myself into it, because normally I'd just sit up and watch the view from I had the best seat in the house in the engineer seat, But after a few landings, I got through that. And so that happened. The incident happened on Monday. The refly happened on Tuesday. And then on Wednesday, I'm home with my wife, and I have a 2.5-year-old son, and I'm watching a TV show that night called That's Incredible. And they had a guy on there named Leslie Lemke talking about his story. And I'm thinking I'm seeing my first miracle watching this guy's story. That night I went to bed. I now understand everything's a miracle. I didn't know that at 24. I'm thinking I'm seeing my first miracle. So I said a simple prayer of just genuine gratitude, thanking God for allowing me to witness my first miracle. And then I added the words, and Lord, it'd be nice if you could do something like that for me someday. Right. Exactly. Careful what you ask for, And I didn't expect anything. I mean, why would you, And so I went to sleep, and sometime in the middle of the night, we call it old dark 30 in the military, sometime at old dark 30, I had an instantaneous shift in consciousness. I didn't go through a tunnel. I wasn't dead. None of that, as far as I know. And all of a sudden, I'm in a black void, and I've got this golden white light that's gigantic and beautiful, the most beautiful thing that exists ever, or ever will exist. And I'm just looking right at it, and no words were spoken to me, but this energy is coming from this extremely intelligent being expressing to me on a deeply personal, intimate level exactly what he felt about me. And the unconditional love that I was being filled with was just fantastic. There are no human words to describe that. I'll give an analogy about what the best analogy I can come up with in a minute, but I want to finish the experience. And so I'm feeling the unconditional love, but the power, I could feel the infinite power of love. I felt it pouring right through me. And I knew that this was my creator, and that if in half a thought of deciding he didn't want, say he, there was no gender, it was just a being of light, didn't want me to exist anymore, I would be gone. But at the same time, it was equally infinite benevolence being given to me, and this sense of how precious I am. I had no idea that I was that precious to anybody. Just couldn't believe what I was feeling. It was all about feeling. There was no sound whatsoever. I call it divine silence. But it was like God was throwing a cosmic scale party. Tony's back, everybody! Yeah! It was just, God is insanely in love with every one of us, and I just had no idea it would be that love was like that. I had just no idea. And I said 3 words in just sheer dumbfounded awe. I said, "Oh my goodness!" In the instant I said the word goodness, the essence of goodness exploded through me, and I was like, "Whoa!" And then there was joy next, there was bliss and ecstasy, peace, harmony, and I had this sense of being home. I knew I was home. I was finally home, and I knew it. And I think there was this moment I call the urge to merge, where you just have this deep innate desire. Nothing else matters. You want to go deeper into the light. That's all you want. Nothing else mattered. I had a wife, a 2.5-year-old son, and didn't even consider that. You can't, because you're so overwhelmed with the experience of now that nothing else can come to your thoughts. I mean, there was no thoughts whatsoever other than the "oh my goodness" thought. And I think God did this because he knew me, that I'm an engineer. I'm very down-to-earth, pragmatic. I mean, I had my belief in God. I never doubted that, but at the same time, I need proof. That's who I am. I'm an engineer. That's how my mind works. And so when that urge to merge moment happened, I physically sat up in bed and had my arms outstretched, and my face was all wet with tears, and I'm facing the end of the bed, looking at the end of the bed across the room at the wall, and there is no wall. The wall's gone, and the light is in my bedroom, about a 10-foot circle. And there's no wall. And God's in my bedroom, and my wife's next to me sleeping, and I could tell by the orientation of her feet that she was facing away from me. And I'm like, it was like 1 billion stars lit up the room. Like, how can she sleep through this? And then I went, this is real. This is really happening. God's in my bedroom. This is real. And then after that, the light just from the outer edges, kind of in a concentric, kind of shrunk down to the center and went away. And when that happened, I just went, no. Just lost the greatest love I'll ever know, and it got ripped away from me. And I just cried. And the wall, the rest of the night, till the sun came up, undulated with this spiritual energy light in it. And as the sun gradually came up, it faded away. And my wife wakes up and sees me sitting there crying. She goes, "What the hell's wrong with you?" Oh man, I was like, how do you explain that? And like, you slept through it. then that following Sunday, I needed answers after that. I'm like, what am I supposed to do with that? What happened to me? Does this ever happen to anybody else? How do I find out? So I didn't know anything. I'm thinking I can go to the church and get my answer. And we were going to a little church on the west end of the island. I had no idea. I mean, well, back in '82, you didn't have the internet to go look things up. You had no resources to do that with. So I didn't know what else to do. I figured, I'd go to the church. They'll let me know, right? And I go to this. They had a guest pastor that week because the other one was on vacation. And I went up to him afterwards, and I was able to express it and get it out, but I cried the whole time. And he just kind of tilted his head and gave me an odd look. And he turned his back on me and walked off and didn't say a word. And I'm dumbfounded again. I was watching this guy's back go away, and I didn't know what to do. And I walked out of the building, and I got angry. I'm not angry with him now. Now I understand he's just another man, and he didn't have the answer. But at the time I got angry, and I got angry at God because I got kicked out of heaven. I wasn't told why. I wasn't allowed to stay, and I had no idea why. And then 4 days later, I get kicked out of the church. So I'm like, the hell with the church and God, I'm not doing that. And I left and did my own thing for 10 years, and cost me a marriage, cost a lot of alcohol abuse and all kinds of other things. The after effects and the psychological problems that happened because I didn't have anybody to talk to were tremendous. And it took me probably 2 decades before I worked through all of that. And had I had somebody to talk to, that would have changed everything for me. But I had no resources whatsoever until I read a book that came out later by Dr. Kenneth Ring called Lessons from the Light. That's when I knew I wasn't crazy. I knew it was real. But that was when it got validated. That was the first time it got validated for me. And that just meant so much. And then that whole path has now led me to, here I am standing in front of you guys, meeting Diane Corcoran, and now I'm going to be on a video, hopefully helping veterans so they don't have to struggle and suffer like I did. And there's an aspect of this post-traumatic stress that's being treated at the VA for the combat stress, but they're not even addressing this. They don't even know about it. They have no clue. And I just met a combat veteran on the way down here in the elevator not half an hour ago named Nate. And he had tattoos all over him, wearing a shirt that had military stuff on it. And I was like, you in the service? He goes, not now, but I was in the Marines. And he was a combat veteran. And I started talking to him, and he had an experience in combat. I said, you don't have to be alone, my friend. Gave him my contact information. And he, big, strong, strapping Marine, he walked out of the elevator with tears in his eyes. I'm going to call you, Chief. I can't wait to talk. That's what this is all about. That literally happened half an hour ago. So I have no idea where God's going to put me, but I tell you what, I'm not going to be quiet anymore. This is too important. And of all the things that I learned over the years about what this is all about, I learned a lot. I looked at all the religions. I started out with the one I grew up with, and then I went to Zoroastrianism, Buddhism, Sufism, the paganism behind it. I went and learned about it. Tibetan Book of the Dead, you name it, I looked it all up. And I came to the understanding that, this is my own understanding, that all religions had some spiritual principles that really applied to what I felt and experienced on the other side, but they also all had man-made agendas that didn't have anything to do with the experience or the truth that I experienced on the other side. So I got away from that. And then I went and looked at the nature of the universe. How can we be here physically? How does God do this? Right? And I studied everything from subatomic particles to how the universe was created and the evolution of it all the way up to including solar systems, galaxies, supermassive black holes, quasars, magnetars. I learned all about that. Nobody can tell you what happens how subatomic particles pop in and out of existence, or what happens when you cross the event horizon of a black hole. God can, but nobody here can. And so that was all cool to learn, but it didn't answer anything really, and it was all neat to learn, but it really all boiled down to this, that I just came to the simple understanding. It's just love. It's all about love. We're here to love on the same scale, learn how to love like God was showing me. And these things, this is how I keep my life simple now. I love God with all my heart, and the way I do that is by loving others, because God is within every one of you, and if I'm loving you, I'm loving God. So I love everybody, and I may not like some people's behavior, but I love them anyway. And so that's kind of my philosophy of life, is I try to just go be love. And that's what I'm doing with Diane, and that's what we're doing for the veterans, and that's my way of showing my love for God and for loving my fellow veterans. And if I'm going to go be love at a level, then I have no fear anymore. I really don't care what anybody else thinks now. It just doesn't matter to me. I know what God thinks of me because I was there, and that's all I care about, is I care about the love and what God thinks, and that's how I'm going to live my life. Thank you.
Very good. Yes, thanks, Tony. All right.
Good job.
Just think there are 100,000, maybe more, other veterans out there like Tony who are feeling this, experiencing this, and have no place to go still in the VA. My experience when I first went to, and I've been teaching this because the day I saw my first soldier who told me about his experience in the middle of the night, I was a second lieutenant in Vietnam, and this young man said, I've got to tell you something, but you've got to promise you'll believe me. This is 1969. Raymond hadn't written his book. Nobody's talking about this. So I go and listen to him, and I am so intrigued. And here he's got tears, he's got intensity. He said, you've got to believe me, this was the most incredible thing. And so I had no idea what he was talking about. But I said, I do believe you. I think this is an extraordinary gift. Had I only had the sense to try to get his name and address and follow up. But, you know, that didn't occur to us then. But I came home from Vietnam with that sort of being vaccinated with that idea that this is absolutely imperative that doctors, nurses, and people understand it. I was still on active duty. They thought I was crazy because I am making everybody listen to me. I'm going to all the, and as a second lieutenant, that's not great because they don't care what you have to say. When I got to be a colonel, it was a different story. Then I made everybody listen to me. But I'm still filled with that passion about here we are 40 years later and we still have this problem. And when I was on active duty, I used to teach in all the courses about NDEs. And actually, people in the Army knew who I was and thought I was sort of like the death and dying lady, they call. And I would have general officers call me and say, I want to tell you about this experience I had, but you can't tell anybody my name, you know, still afraid. And it does take sometimes 50 to 100 years for behavior to catch up with information. So I'm not sure I'll be around for the 100 years, but I'm going to push and do everything I can for as long as I can to reach that goal. And so this is all part of what we're doing here. We're giving scholarships to disabled vets. We're encouraging them. I just got an email today from a vet that I talked to, and he said, I'm so sorry I couldn't come to the conference. I'm just not ready to talk about it. But could I talk to somebody? And so I will hook him up with Tony or one of the other vets. I would love for any other vets if they'd like to tell their story. We want this to be a home for you. We want this for you to be able to talk to us, to call us. We are going to do some special programs for veterans. There are a lot of things that we'd like to do as we go down this road together. And Tony's going to help us do some fundraising so that we can do some really outreach to people that we know are desperate for information. Is there anybody that would like to share their story?
So open up your wallets.
Yeah. Dana?
One of them is empty.
Here.
So I'm Dr. Dana Robinson Street, and I served in the military. I'm Tony's friend, and I served in the military for almost 26 years as an enlisted member of the Navy and as a naval officer. And I would like to, first of all, thank you, Diane, for your continued support of veterans. And Tony, of course, you know, I think you're awesome, and I just commend you for being brave enough to stand up and speak to us and share your experience. And Roberta, thank you for everything that you're doing to get this message out here. Veterans need help. I cannot say that enough. By training, I'm a primary care and emergency medicine provider. Okay, and I also do things in the palliative area. But if you knew the impact of the veteran experience, you would not only realize that not only do we have near-death experiences, we live death experiences almost on a daily basis. The impact to the veteran is tremendous. Statistically, right now, it is estimated that 23 veterans will die today as a result of suicide.
By the way, that's the equivalent of a World War II Bataan death march every year after the end of the year. That's over 8,000 people a year.
And more than 600 a month, and that's the low estimate. So the reality is that veterans have to have the opportunity to share. They've got to have the opportunity to talk. They need to have the freedom that others have to give their experiences. And so I'm just thankful to be here today. And I'm really, really happy to know that you all are taking this mission forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yes, and we need to get her on print.
I need to talk to you.
Yes, we need that call to service, call to arms for our veterans. And it helps to be a physician because many physicians don't get it. They don't understand it. And unfortunately, what happens at the VA, we had this happen at the office. They go to the VA, they try to tell their story, and they're told that they're bipolar, they're borderline, they're crazy. They fill them full of drugs, which make them crazier, and then it's a disaster. And one young man that came to us, he was also a Marine, we said, no, this is never going to work. We actually knew a specific thing that he needed. We had him regressed back to his injury and slowly got him off all his meds. He was a computer guy, ended up going back to work. These people don't need therapy for the most part. They need validation. They need an ear to listen. And some are so afraid because if they have a security clearance, they're afraid it's going to do that, mess with that. They're actually afraid that they won't get their benefits. Right. If they tell somebody about this experience, they'll be labeled as mental health problem or for whatever reason. And if you can see, as Dana's talking about, and I've worked with them, people have had multiple rotations, multiple horrible experiences. They do have PTSD, and then they're just thrown in that group. On top of that, they have all kinds of physical ailments that require problems. And then, you know, you go and try to tell somebody about your NDE, and they're going, oh, you know, I don't want to hear about that. I actually went to the VA and talked to the chief of psychiatry, and I said, I'd like to know how you differentiate between a young person who may be having a psychotic break, that happens in that age group, and someone who had a near-death experience. And she said, what's a near-death experience? Yes. What's a near-death experience? So there's where I hope we're down the road a little bit from that, but it's going to take all of us to keep punching away at this, pulling, getting to talk to people, and just keep doing it. And anyway, all of you can help. We need to do this. And Tony and I and Roberta, we're going to keep pushing and making people crazy. And I've started when I was a lieutenant talking about this, that it was really important. And you give information, and if it's one person or 5 people that you talk to, as Tony met somebody in the elevator, the right people will be there. And so you can't worry about crowds or who you have. Just know that you'll save somebody's life if you can get to them and be available to talk to them. So is there anybody that would like to share their experience?
I'd like to share a comment. If you heard me introduce the video, the research for non-experiencers that get exposed to this information, hear other people's experiences in therapy, people with suicidal ideation are reversed, that they are helped and assisted. So in the veterans arena with all this suicide history, it's not about what the interpretation of the experience is. Is it ethereal? It's about the results. If you can help people with this approach, what does it matter what the source is?
Right.
In my military career, I have used the near-death experience for many, many different things. While I was in Germany, a young family one day, I was the chief nurse, so in charge of this Frankfurt General Hospital, and we were during Desert Storm, so we were ramping up for ground fire and 1,000 beds, and it was a nightmare. And the chief of psychiatry said, "This is so-and-so and so-and-so, a German wife, African-American GI who was there, and they took their baby to the commissary. The baby didn't look well. They ran across the clinic, and the baby died." And here is this chief of psychiatry or pediatrics, "Could you help them?" Well, and just left him in my office. Well, I was there all day. I went to the morgue, I got the baby, I did what I needed to do so that mother had time and father had time to do what they needed to do in the grief process. But eventually, I slowly introduced the whole concept of the near-death experience to them. So you can't do that initially, but so people can try to understand what it's like over there. It's not horrible for this baby. And I have used it in so many different arenas because it relates to all of us. And now when I go out and do a lecture, we're all going to die. Aren't you interested in what it'll be like? Everybody should be interested in what it'll be like. So we're here, we're fighting that battle, and anybody like to make some comments or just ask some questions? Yes, sir.
Yes. Thank you, Tony. Does IANDS have a formal peer-to-peer support program where the volunteers get actually trained in terms of how to speak with near-death experiencers? Because I'm an experiencer of a very similar phenomenon, and I went the whole year before I was able to talk to anyone. My wife also had experienced the same thing, but she saw it as purely angelic. And in that year, you go through a lot of transitions, like a lot of people here go through, and one of those, whether you're mentally unstable. And it wasn't until I hooked up with someone who served as a peer-to-peer mentor for me that introduced me to the experience that I had, that did say that there's thousands of people that had very, very similar experiences. And then I was introduced to other experiencers. And I now work with an organization that has a formal peer-to-peer support program. We train the volunteers, and over an 18-month period, we have supported 450 people that had these types of experiences. And so it's something that if IANDS doesn't have, it's something that you should consider, because it's extremely, like Tony and others have said, all you want is just someone to talk to.
We have actually two support systems.
We have a sister organization by the name of Assist who actually has a certification process for therapists. And they go through that, so they're specifically trained to deal with people who have NDEs. We have groups all around the country who are there to support and educate and provide support to experiencers. And we now have, and I don't think Susan's in here, but we've gone from like 44 groups to 80 groups. And every day I got 2 people here that said, oh, I would love to start a group. So we do that. And we also have people, especially for veterans, we have a helpline for veterans, and they can call and email, and I will pick up that email. And if I usually have people call me, veterans, and I am happy to talk with them directly to provide support. Yes?
Let's understand how you do that. We'd be loving to train people in
Yep.
that ability.
We should talk more about that as together. Yeah.
We can follow up. I, together with millions of other people, have had UFO-related contact experience, where I had an energy being that appeared in my living room. And just like a UFO, an NDE experience is completely transformative, as Dr. Kenneth Ring in his book Omega Project wrote about that. And then, interestingly enough, after that, I had a series of NDE-related events. And in a study that we've done with other academics, we've demonstrated in a 600-question survey administered to 3,000 individuals. Out of these 3,000 people, 36% had an NDE. 80% have had out-of-body experiences. 50% have had a medical healing by these non-human intelligence. And also, this is not anything related to UFOs. This is way, way down the rabbit hole. The vast majority of entities that people are seeing are actually energy beings. And that's and then the number 2 is human-looking beings. And these human-looking beings appear in either white tunics or white robes, like monks' robes. Communication is telepathically. People get returned with precognition skills, the ability to see auras around people, electronic devices. You name everything with the NDE experience, same thing with the people that have had UFO-related contact. So we, in our study, which is 8 retired PhD scientists are involved with it, we've concluded that both the NDE experience and the UFO-related contact experience are very tangential. It's actually the same thing, except different aspects of the same thing. And one of those is the trauma that people have.
We know, and it's my belief that a very large number of veterans are having experiences, NDE experiences. And the other group that is even more difficult to think about are those people, the TBIs. They're having these experiences. They're having near-death experiences. They don't remember them. And then they go along and have all the after effects. I worked with another veteran group, and I went out with the founder one night, and we were doing a foundation or something. And he got up to give, and this is a great big guy, handsome guy, giving his story about he and his best friend were in high school together. They joined the Army together. They were in the same Humvee that exploded together. He got the invisible injury of a TBI. His friend lost both his legs. And when he starts telling his story, and I look at, over time I've met him, he has lots of after effects of NDEs. But he said, no, I don't know anything about it. I've never had an NDE. And I said, oh, yes, you have. And I actually sent him an angel membership to our magazine, feeling maybe if he reads about it a little bit, this will start to sink in. And it will someday. And someday maybe he'll be here.
But it is a large number of people because it's such great trauma. I mean, these people are losing limbs like crazy. So many of them are lucky to be alive. It's only with our great advances in medical that they are alive. And so we're having to work with these people a lot more, and there's going to be more and more. But imagine the hundreds of thousands of Iraqi and Afghanistan vets that are out there with the PTSD, with the physical injuries, and I worked with some of them, and it is sad. It's terribly sad. And then you throw an NDE on top of it, and they don't know what to do. But we are dedicated to try to change that. Did you have a comment?
I'm Nakia DeVita. I'm a veteran also, Air Force. And one of the things that I was just kind of moved to share about all this as well is even inside of the military, separate from an NDE, are also the spiritually transformative experiences that aren't NDEs per se, but people are having those kinds of experiences all over the place, left and right, that still can't be spoken about. And one of the additional things that you were talking about in terms of therapy or the diagnosis of having a personality disorder and so forth, sometimes because personality disorders are considered pre-existing conditions, then they are discharged with no benefits, with no support. So essentially they're abandoned, by the very organization that, they were called to serve. So I wanted to highlight that because it's not like they can even go to the VA sometimes because they've been discharged and so forth. So that population, I think, and it hadn't even occurred to me until I was here, I've been having spiritually transformative experiences, out-of-body experiences, since I was this high. But it didn't occur to me that that was anything like this. So it's like, oh, okay, yeah, I've had lots of those. So that's kind of interesting.
Welcome to the club.
I didn't think anything of it because it didn't occur through a near death. But
or did it? You always have to look back at the circumstances.
There are certainly plenty of trauma, so in that sense, that certainly could have been, but it still wasn't near death. But anyway, the other thing I wanted to share was that two things is I have a nonprofit called Sisters Who Serve for military female veterans, so military women, female veterans and their families, called Sisters Who Serve, to provide help, support, and so forth. And so I'm really gratified to be here to also be able to support with NDEs and other related experiences as part of that organization that I felt called to be a founding member of. And then secondly, Dr. Robert Peace, who's also a veteran and 4-time NDEer, is going to be speaking tomorrow at 10:15 to essentially support people in sharing their story. And there's a difference between telling your story and sharing your story in order to create emotional connection such that in the sharing versus telling of a story, there's actually spontaneous healing that occurs through something called brain syncing. So be sure to catch that, especially if you're called to share this to help and support other people who've had those similar experiences. So thank you.
Thanks, Nikki. I want to make a point that you just mentioned, because it is something that is a point of confusion for many people. You do not need to be near death to have a near-death experience. Correct. You might have been sick, you might have had an accident, you might have had be electrocuted, you might have almost drowned, you could have had surgery. There's lots of incidents, but you don't.
Be trauma.
Yeah. There's all kinds of things. So please know that you don't actually have to be near death in order to have an NDE. And that's certainly things we have found out since Raymond wrote the title of his book. That's what he thought at the time because he was working with cardiac patients, but not true. Anybody else have any questions? Yes, Robert.
I just want to make a statement that comes.
I just want to make a statement because it dawned on me what happened. I went from active duty, then I moved to the Air National Guard several years later, and 1984. And in 1991, I had a near-death experience. I'm in the Air National Guard. I retired from the Air National Guard in 1998. In that interim, between 1991, I became a licensed clinical social worker. Not once did I think of sharing that with anybody in my unit because it would have affected my promotion. They would have looked at me and said, this guy's not fit for promotion. And when my gang came up, the people on the board would have went, uh-oh, we don't want this guy. Because of that culture, I'm just thinking back, I wonder how many people felt like I did, but were dying to share, and we didn't know who we could talk to. And I'm an embedded clinician right now with a military police unit who will, I don't even bring this up, because they will tell my boss to let me go because it's too, quote, spooky, unquote. So that attitude still prevails. And I don't know how you can, I'm praying this works, but work that in where people can say, you know, it's not going to affect my promotion. It's not going to affect my career. It's not going to affect my security clearance or anything else.
It is an issue, and sometimes I wonder how I ever got to be a colonel, because I was like a dog with a bone with this.
I absolutely wanted to talk about this. I wanted to tell people about it, and you know, it is an issue for people. That promotion, it could be for a lot of different reasons, and we only can, the more and more it gets out, I mean, you know, when I started there wasn't one book written. Now we have several books written by physicians and many, many other people, and we're not paying attention to the time, Ned. Just in case you're wondering, anybody that wants to leave, they can, but I want to make sure we get everybody to be able to say what they want to say, because this is our time.
Thanks for doing your job.
Okay, my son has PTSD, and he probably went through about 5 IED explosions. He's had 5 concussions, and it's been almost a decade. And when he first came back, he tried to go to college, and there was a backfire of a car, and it startled him or put him right back into the arena, and he nosedived under a truck and had more injuries. And I don't think he ever went back to class again until this past year, and he audited classes, not for a grade, but just to get back in the routine. And he's had flashbacks, and I wonder if these flashbacks are kind of NDEs. And a year ago, things got so bad, and I knew things were going downhill, and he just lost it. And he kicked down my front door in like 3 seconds flat. It was just something just overwhelmed him, and I was in shock. He was in shock. He started crying, and anybody else probably would have called 911, but I just stood there and prayed. And we got through that, and he realized how much he needed help. Then I went to the Invictus Games just to meet people and to volunteer. And I met the captain of the rugby team. I met the Wounded Warrior people, and then would connect him to talk to them. And he finally talked to another soldier, which is what you're talking about. And I think they had like an hour-long conversation. And I could tell a difference in him after that. And we're actually going out of the VA to get help for him, because it's so hard once they have gotten their percentage, and for pride, they will turn down disability and take maybe 10% when they should have 90% or 100%. So we're fighting that now. And I'm just wanting to relate to Tony. I've had probably 3 or 4 in my lifetime. Since I was a little girl, I got hit by a car. I know I've had concussions, but I'm well educated. I have 3 degrees. I'm a professor. You don't talk about this stuff to the common people, especially to your cohorts and people you teach or you teach with. And I want to say a few years ago, I had an extreme hard fall, and I had a concussion, broke my clavicle in 3 places, refused surgery twice. I didn't want anything to do with surgery. Came home, I was alone, living alone, and I knew that I better not fall asleep. And I got the frozen corn on my shoulder, my head, my elbow, wherever I needed it, and just laid there and prayed. And all of a sudden, the room just opened up to the universe, and I felt like I was on Mars, but I saw the most beautiful sky and all the stars of the universe, exactly like you spoke of it. And I'm telling you, it was like the most beautiful blue sky, and maybe, the concussion and everything else put me in that place, but it was a peacefulness, and I felt like I could touch the sky, the stars, and I was in my bed in my room. The walls disappeared, exactly like you spoke about it, Tony, and my name is Tony. All 10 generations behind me are Anthony's. But anyway, the body heals itself, and I healed naturally my bone breakage. But I'm still working on my own PTSD from traumas, and also to relate to my son and get help for him. So my greatest prayer is that, he'll continue on this path, and he is in counseling, but he is on medicine, which is also an element for maintaining, and he's held down a job for about 7 or 8 months, but it's been a decade since his 2 tours to Iraq, and I would wake up at odd hours of the night, which would be a different time zone for him in Iraq, of an event that occurred. And when I talked to him the next day, he would say, "Mom, everybody's crying and throwing up," and I knew why, because of what they'd seen, what they'd gone through, and the horror, like the Civil War again. So, yeah, we really need to do something more. And I'm a volunteer. I'm a hospice volunteer. I'm a teacher, health educator, and I'm ready to go to the VA. I'm ready to sit on the White House steps and really get this out.
Yes.
And it takes all of us. It takes every single one of us together as a team. God bless you, Colonel. You go, girl.